real life meeting yesterday? Did you meet with some Colonel fellows?
Yeah, it was interesting to meet everyone. It's been a while since we had this connection, this real connection.
Sure. Awesome. Glad to hear. We're gonna do a small New York dinner tomorrow, so we're gonna see some people for that. Excited for everyone who can make it. DM me if you can't. I'm gonna spotlight our two most important people for the day. We have Adrian and Paul. Hello, Adrian.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Wonderful. Okay. We'll give everyone a minute to trickle in. I see a bunch of people still joining. But we'll kick off with a combined culture and gaming track kickoff. There'll be a session at the beginning where Paul and Adrian will take you through what I think is perhaps the most important topic to be thinking through in why build anything on Web3 versus on previous technology solutions. What's the reason why this might be better for the individuals who are engaging in those communities, whether they be artistic or technical endeavors, or hopefully a combination of the two more often. So Adrian and Paul are best suited for that conversation. A couple of tactical notes. So I have disabled the chat, but that is for one reason and one reason only, which is that we can chat in the track culture channel in Slack. And we had some really great kickoffs yesterday where we had the DeFi and security track kickoff, and the chat was just incredibly active. And the point is that Paul and Adrian's discussion is, of course, valuable. The Slack conversations and the random people that you might meet there could be just as important, if not more. And Paul, Adrian, and I are very much aware of that. So please engage, have it open. It's better than Zoom chat because you can, of course, DM people after if you have any questions, thoughts, or things you want to follow up on based on what projects people are building. So the first part of that is taking a second here to give everyone maybe a minute to say hi in the Track Culture channel. If there's a quick word or two you want to share about your project, many of them might have already seen them in intros. And this is a long 6-week conversation. So don't feel like you have to get it all out now. We'll be here, we'll be around, and that's the point of Slack. So thank you all. I see a lot of the engagement. Also, big shout out to Antonio, who put one of the most amazing posts in kernel Slack that has ever happened. It's now going higher up. I'm gonna have to pull it back down. I have no choice. It was just posted yesterday in the culture channel. Antonio is an incredible dancer with a deep history in dance and how it relates to what we're building. So I just put it in the channel for anyone else to pin. I'm just gonna pin it. It was great. So thank you all. And with that, I'd love if Adrian and Paul, you guys could share a bit about yourselves before getting into everything else. The backgrounds that Paul and Adrian have are well beyond Web3 and I think are artistic in nature. If you look at it very closely, and not even that closely at all. They've done things spanning the gamut in the gaming, arts, in Web3, and in music for Adrian, I know. And so the things that they bring to the table are far beyond just their Web3 hats. And the hope is that everyone here is willing to explore not only what they're trying to do in the Web3 world, but the artistic endeavors, the technical endeavors that we can bring together in this new paradigm where we can build value creative systems. So I'll pass the mic to Adrian and Paul. If you want to do a quick intro before getting into those presentations, go ahead and take it away from there.
How should we do this, Paul?
Yeah, Adrian, you can go first, I think.
All right, cool. Hey, everyone. I'll start the presentation since I do like a really quick intro part of it. So that's maybe like a really good kickoff. So just give me a second. Can I share my screen?
Should be able to.
Yeah. Da-da-da. Is this working? Oh, spoilers. Nope, spoilers. Look at
Close
that.
your eyes, close your eyes.
Failure already from the start. Wait. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian, and I guess welcome to the culture track. This is going to be like a really quick presentation. I don't want to take too much of everybody's time, and I think the focus is very much for fellows to meet each other. So I'm just going to go through a few quick slides here to set the stage a little bit. So we give like a bit of an intro to the culture track, and I thought it would be a good idea to lay some values that at least I gained in the past few years working with Web3. So talking at a high level about value creation versus value extraction. And above all, welcome to Block 3. Oh, my computer's not helping me. So yeah, first of all, welcome to the culture track. Welcome to Kernel. I guess like a great way to set the stage is that you are now part of like this great community of Web3 enthusiasts. We're all here helping shape creator economies of tomorrow, especially in the culture and gaming track. And we're doing so together. So the goal here is very much to co-create. A really quick intro about myself, like Vivek already started. I come from the music tech industry before dwelling down the Web3 rabbit hole, mostly as a software developer, a UX designer, and a product manager. I joined crypto in early 2017 as an indie hacker, so just an independent builder. First of all, building community tools, so basically just getting my feet wet in the space, I guess like finding my community. In 2018, I joined MakerDAO, which is, I guess, a big foundation of DeFi today. And I've been there, I guess, until a few months ago. In 2019, I started to venture into crypto art very lightly, just playing around with the idea of creating art using blockchain data. And I got to meet a lot of like talented artists in the space. And towards the end of last year, I started a NFT platform project called Eve Block Art, which I was honored to be part of Kernel Block 2 as a fellow adventurer as well. And talking a little bit about Kernel, also honored to be part of it since Block 1. So I guess I'm doing like the blockchain of Kernel with 1, 2, 3 hat trick. So talking a little bit about the culture track, it's 170 plus fellows. It's very much a bottom-up program. There isn't like a strict agenda. I think that also goes hand in hand with the ethos of culture. It's defined by the participants in this network. So it's a community-driven track. The focus is very much about having self-formed juntos, as we have been seeing for the past week already, which is actually amazing to see. Like Vivek mentioned, there is a Slack that we are sharing, that we are getting to meet each other, getting to talk to each other, and it's already filled with great resources for us all to research. And there are dozens and dozens of great mentors who have been active in the space for many years, who have been helping shape the space for many years, and who are here basically to help you. They're just one DM away. Reach out, ask any question that comes to your mind, and I'm sure they will have a great answer to give you. There will be sessions every 2 weeks. I guess this is the first one of them. And the follow-up ones will have special guests. So I guess the next one will be Simona Pop and Sarah Zucker talking a little bit about crypto art. Sarah Zucker is a very respected artist in the space that's been around for many years and who creates really amazing art. You should all check it out. And Sam Spike, who is kickstarting a curation-related project in the NFT space, comes from the traditional art world and has a lot of really good ideas and insights into the history of art, I guess, and dwelling into what we're experiencing in the NFT space today. And I guess, like as was introduced already, there is a lot of overlaps with the gaming guild. which is led by Paul, who's also here. And there's a lot of material from the Gaming Guild from the previous block. So that's that acts like as a great, I guess, syllabus for those adventuring into the culture track. There's a lot of basically similar principles, similar ideas, which should help you bridge your knowledge from Web 2 into what we're doing into Web 3. And I guess stepping back a little bit more, talking a little bit about kernel, which you're probably already familiar with. This program should help you learn what it means to building Web3. A lot of the material that's there is aimed at bringing you back to first principles, giving you like a good conceptual understanding of what is going on here, which I guess we can all agree to some extent is the definition of the culture that we're here to build, right? So in a way of putting it, almost the whole kernel syllabus is relating to culture. And it should help you better understand the technology that we're building together, the cultural movement, which is being enabled by this technology, and a lot of the principles which are guiding this movement. And essentially, you're now, like I said earlier, you're part of this community of other talented fellows helping each other realize new projects, realize new ideas in the space. So talking a little bit about the other topic of this presentation, about value creation versus value extraction, to just give a snapshot observation of what we're experiencing, at least from my point of view, out there. We're seeing the Cambrian explosion of culture in this Web3 network, which we call Ethereum. And one quote that stuck to me in the past few months from this book called Rational Optimism, which says that free trade causes mutual prosperity, and where commerce thrives, creativity and compassion both flourish. And many of the examples that we've seen throughout history, if you look back to Florence, Pisa, Venice, Amsterdam, and London, and I guess today Ethereum, these are societies to some extent where a lot of value is being created via free trade and I guess commerce in the context of DeFi. And that is leading to the prosperity, mentioning the code above, both, but also the explosion of culture. And one way of looking at this is that the more people become part of the society, the more culture explodes, and the more culture explodes, the more people get attracted to this culture, I guess, to some extent, right? So this relates to an article that I shared earlier on Slack as well, which talks about the token economy and how money, likes, and I guess now we're talking about social tokens, NFTs, DAOs, they are essentially very similar things and memes, right? The tokenization of culture to some extent. And if you look at this evolution of trade chart, it starts to resemble a lot the evolution of DeFi in many extents, right? Like something that started with like, we get to create trustless exchanges or like one-to-one trade-like exchanges all the way up to these contracts with complete trustless decentralized systems that allow us to exchange tokens among each other, exchanging value, right? I won't dwell into this too much. There's a very long article which will be able to explain it a lot better than me. I'm just going to basically throw a bunch of resources there for you to think about. And then we fast forward to the current state of Ethereum, the current state of the NFT space. And something that you read a lot of thought leaders in the space talk about is this resemblance to something like RuneScape back in the day. And I think this is a great example to talk about because one, it also hints towards the intersection between culture and gaming, especially in the context of Web3. And two, I hope that at least some in this call have experienced the whole MMORPG phenomena when they were younger. And they probably relate to a lot of the experiences that they had back then with some of the experiences they're about to face within Web3, right? Except instead of playing within this RuneScape-like downtown, we are hanging out in Twitter, we're hanging out in metaverses, but we are doing the very similar things. We're interacting with other people across the globe. We're exchanging value. We are influencing each other. We're inspiring each other. We're creating new connections. We're creating new communities. And then we talk about the idea of creating value and versus extracting value. Some would say that we need to rethink the way that we look at value in general. Some would say that modern economies currently, and I guess for a lot of us coming from a Web2 context, this is what we're used to, they reward activities that extract value from a playing field, I guess, rather than creating it. And we often forget that things of value tends to be co-created. And I think this is a great way to look at what we're all thinking about building in general, because we are not building in a vacuum. We're all dealing with limited resources. And for us to extract value from Web3, it means that we're taking value from somebody else, which is exactly the idea of zero-sum game theory, which I'm about to talk to in a bit as well. And without diving too much into it, there's a lot of great material out there to research. The one takeaway that I would like to lay here that I would love to have heard when I started is to look beyond the short-term value that you get to extract or create, especially in a bull market that we're experiencing today, and focusing more on the long-term value, which is also this idea of, as cliche as it sounds, to lean on first principles about what we're building and why we're building it, and to practice second-level thinking, which is a good learning lesson from the investment side of things, which can also be applied to the builder mentality in the space. And as much as we are creatives, as much as we don't really want to think too much about the numbers, it goes a long way to learn economics, at least a little bit, to get a grip of game theory and to research like the history of information technology and how it relates to the evolution of culture. The internet plays a huge role into that. Another big quote that stuck to me over many years is that if we fast forward, I guess 100 years plus, and we look back to the current state of affairs, it's almost like this very long chapter lasting multiple decades where a lot of culture becomes digital, a lot of communities become digital. And now we're basically solving the value problem of it, or the ability to exchange value among ourselves. I talked a little bit about game theory. I think one amazing resource that should give you a basic understanding of what we're talking about is this site that we can share the link later. And it mostly, I think the main idea that you can take from this interactive experience is the value in cooperation, and how you can, it's actually a really cool site if you haven't experienced it. You get to do a few simulations there, and you quickly realize that it pays off to be cooperative and to approach everything from this angle of co-creation. So yeah, this is a very short, quick primer. I think the main takeaways from this presentation is that during the next 6 weeks, look for new ways to create value together to help shape Web3 bottom up. Make sure to meet other fellows, ask mentors for help. This is a great opportunity to interact with them and learn from their experiences, and use the Gaming Guild material and the rest of the kernel syllabus to set a foundation for your knowledge as you venture through Web3. And above all, make sure to participate all the way. There is another quote, which I think is good to lay behind, is expect nothing and appreciate everything that you come across. And especially those experiences that you get to create with others in the same place as you. And yeah, just to wrap up with a quick little meme, and I'll pass the stick to Paul, which I think can also share some great ideas there. So yeah, thank you. And I guess welcome to the culture track, everyone.
Thanks, Adrian. Solid meme to end on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Then I can build up on that. Let me also just share my screen as well. So I'm on the new Mac, so it's asking me for some permissions. Just take care of it.
While Paul is pulling that together, I know there was lots of comments in the chat. Feel free to check out all of the cool things people are building, some conversations happening. One of the ideas that is being discussed is between collaborative and competitive environments, specifically in the arts, how often it has gotten competitive or hyper competitive, and how we might build systems that at least nudge towards a more collaborative environment, that reward collaboration in ways that the current system clearly has not rewarded that as much as it perhaps would be ideal. So take it away, Paul.
Cool. Yeah. Everyone can see it fine.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So thank you, Adrian, for for that very nice intro to what culture is in terms of Web3. So I'm leading the kernel gaming track, and I guess I can start with a bit of a story on how I've kind of found kernel. And I've been a builder in the space, mostly in the game development space, since around 2003, I would say. So I've been making games since they were coming out in the old Nokia phones, and that's actually where it got started in my gaming career. So I've seen, I guess I've seen the game industry kind of move in waves of technology. And when blockchain came out, I kind of, I guess I didn't fully appreciate what it can it can bring to gaming. I explored blockchains, I explored cryptocurrency, and I would say it's only after, I guess, meeting the community in kernel in East Denver, where I met Vivek and kind of got into Gitcoin, wherein kind of understood what the big picture is really on what we're building. And this is how I kind of patterned the gaming track. It's based on the Learn track, which Andrew is curating, and it kind of, I guess, it hopes to take people on the same journey, I would say, that I took in understanding how we could use Web3 more in, I guess, in a more meaningful way than what I've seen technology has been used in games for the past few years. And yeah, so a bit of an intro on how the kernel gaming track would go. As Adrian mentioned, it's really all about the peer connections. When you listen to the first modules in the Learn track, one of the videos there from Paul Myberg was saying we should aspire to positive sum horizontal conversations. I think that's the goal here as well. I think there's more to be learned from these conversations we have with each other than just me just talking over everyone on the slides. And just, I guess, as an intro on how the gaming track modules were built, where they kind of reference each of the Learn track modules. So the intent here was you would go through the Learn track on the firesides with Andy and with the great people that Kernel is bringing in, and perhaps read the gaming track module after that to kind of, if you want to get a more gaming focused context on what the Learn track was teaching. For the schedules, this is the first one, which is an intro and a bit of a discussion on the business of games, and maybe we could have a breakout after around that. But we'll do this every other week. But every week you can go through each of the modules on the game track, and I'll share them on the Slack channel so people can get to be reminded about them. So yeah, so I have a few slides around culture and gaming.
Yeah.
Specifically, yeah, Vivek, go.
I just wanted to say one thing. One reason why we decided to combine, and part of the reason was Adrian and I were talking about, like, well, hey, Paul would be like one of the best guests for the beginning of the culture track. And so that was part of the reason why we combined. But the other reason, as we go through the main kernel syllabus, what will become clear is that the gaming industry likely has the most relevant experience in creating collaborative, engaging environments that anyone who's building in Web3 now could consider. One of the definitions that Andy in the main syllabus puts to Ethereum is this one sentence that has a lot to it, but I'll try to say it slowly and break it down. It's a perfect language focused on creating increasingly principled multiplayer games. Increasingly principled multiplayer games. And the idea being that Solidity is a perfect language, i.e. it's Turing complete, and anyone anywhere around the world can read, audit, and understand a Solidity code, what Solidity code compiles down to. But then the increasingly principled multiplayer games part talks about how each one of these games is unique, and the games we design within our social token communities, within our NFTs, within any of the tools that we build thereon, they have implications. And Paul, at the beginning of Genesis Block, started sharing some incredible resources from people like Daniel Cook and from Lost Garden and from all of these kind of pockets of the gaming world that had been thinking about how to design games for cooperation, designing games for altruism, designing games that led to human emotions that are good in some sense versus things that increase fear or anxiety or envy. And it's in that kind of like distinction, those types of ideas that it felt right that Paul could come and share some of those ideas, because it's very relevant to whatever we do on the culture check.
Yeah, I agree. And I really like what Vivek, I think you mentioned on Twitter when we were starting the gaming track, which is token ecosystems or gaming ecosystems are a perfect corollary for token ecosystems. And I kind of see them as one and the same thing. Like it's just a game that we're designing, right? So we can look back at what these other people have been really looking at this space and trying to design the games that we should be making, and kind of get the knowledge that they have and try to apply that to what we're building. And yeah, and having said that, I think what our goal is for this session at least is to kind of see the connections between gaming and culture, because there's definitely a lot. And Vivek, it was good that you mentioned Antonio, actually, like dance, something that we think is very different, very far from gaming. There's really a very good connection. Like dance, for example, is one of the reasons why one of these games like Fortnite became very popular. Like in Fortnite, there were each of the for the skins you could purchase emotes, you could purchase these dances, which actually were gotten from, I guess, the popular TikTok dances. And there was some, I remember there was some scandal around them not paying the dancers or not giving them enough value from that. So that's something of a problem that we should also possibly try to think about and try and solve around where is value creation and where is value extraction happening. And in one of the gaming track modules, one of the quotes is, "This has always been a pattern of technology, that the startups working on seemingly esoteric technologies will be the ones that define the thought patterns of future generations." And we can kind of see that. Adrian has shared RuneScape, which has shaped the thought patterns of a lot of us. Now we see Among Us, which is one of the famous games right now. Its vocabulary is entering into the mainstream. Like when someone says you're sus, you're suspicious, like that's something you see on Twitch a lot. You see your kids say that. So it's really, it's a slow, I guess, slow seeping of the culture from gaming into the mainstream. And now that all of these worlds are colliding in the metaverse, we see Roblox, Minecraft, games that our kids are playing. We see Fortnite and it's merging with Marvel, with Hollywood. Then it's really just really a big melting pot of culture and games. So I guess it behooves us to understand how these games are made and how to make them better. And having said that, with all of these new technologies, I always come back also to the things that the kernel gaming track or the kernel learn track teaches us. And this was shared by Andy a few days back from one of the verses. Actually, he says that the thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. So even if there's a lot of new things coming up, technology continues to move forward, there are still things that don't change. There are things that we can still learn from what has happened. So one of the modules in the kernel gaming track that I created was just a look through the timeline of the game industry to see the moments in time that I felt were significant. And it's I guess it's really enlightening to take a look at what has happened through the past few years in gaming in reference to what's happening with Web3 as well. For example, virtual items or NFTs, that is happening. There's been, I guess, pockets of that happening for a while. Like there's this quote from back in 2010, they estimate virtual goods revenue to reach 350 million, which is now, I guess, just one NFT that you're selling, or just a few NFTs will be able to reach that, right? So it's these blips in technology, I would say, have happened before, and we can see some parallels looking back. And another one is around when social games were starting to come out. So this was when the merging of social games and games themselves started to happen, similar to what is happening now with the merging of games and Web3. Like some people that were making games more as a creative endeavor felt that they were making games that were a bit evil because of the capitalist bent. But I'm personally, I think we could have done better with how social games and games in general merged. But it's good to take a look at what people were recognizing back then and knowing that these were things that people were already thinking about when they were creating something with these new technology. And I want to end with this slide because I think this is a good discussion point also, and something that Adrian touched on a bit, which is value creation versus value extraction. And having been in the game industry for quite a while, I've kind of seen it mature in certain phases. I remember when mobile games were starting out, the games there weren't really that great, but people were making a lot of money on them. People were really experimenting on what you can do. Same with social, same with web, with Flash. And eventually all of these, I guess all of the industry kind of centralizes around these platforms that extracts most of the value. So this diagram on game developer creation, distribution, discoverability, monetization, I think it's just not for games, it's for all of the industries in the culture track. You can kind of see that with artists as well, with music, with film, wherein the value kinds of goes farther and farther from the player and or the user and the creator. So what can we do to kind of change that? What can we do to build something new, something that I guess blockchains and Ethereum can help us do? And I think I just really want to end with people thinking about that, because meaningful change comes from how technologies or startups change the power dynamics of the industry itself, I feel.
Yeah. I think this is a huge slide. I just put it in the Slack, and it speaks to some of the conversations that are happening in the threads. Chibu talking about artists that he know who are skeptical of the newer solutions. I think partially because it's so often the case that it goes down this path. You go from creation by a particular artist, in this case on the left side shown as game developer, then they have to go to somebody to distribute it who tries to take a cut, somebody else who helps with discoverability who tries to take another cut. And by the time the artist looks at it, you have pennies that are flowing back to that individual. This was the model. It was not in itself evil. At a time in the past, it perhaps was meaningful to artists, but of course there's so many stories at these days about, you know, like why these things should change. And this circle at the bottom, this has been my biggest thought, I think, as it relates to culture and gaming. I'll mostly be quiet in this track, but this idea that the most value in these networks comes from the interactions between the people. It's not, in this case, Adrian or Paul or I speaking right now. It's what's happening in Slack, the people that get to know each other. And in the context of an artist, why are there not so many experiences around two different fans who want to engage with each other and want to deeply engage with the content that they're they're working within or playing within. Why are we not designing for those types of valuable interactions where if you put two fans in a room together and say you guys are not just fans that are checking a box or adding a number to a count of listens on a Spotify playlist, you're actually two unique individuals who maybe would enjoy meeting each other in a different context. That feels very valuable. How to quantify that, how to get that back to artists, these are all like questions, but in terms of creation, the circle seems to have an interesting characteristic there. So I think, Paul, you're kind of at the end of the slide. So thank you for taking us through this.
You're welcome. Let's just stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. I want to open it up for Q&A for Adrian, for Paul, for any of the stewards, if you have questions on like how things will roll. We have 90 minutes blocked off here. We, don't have to take the whole time. And the plan for the second half is breakouts, where this will be kind of like the last session of relatively unstructured breakouts, where you'll be in a room with 3 or 4 other people who are around in this block. From this week onward, once we start week 2 all the way to week 7, the hope is that the breakouts are a bit more structured. Maybe there'll be some like pre-work to do to show progress on your project and somebody to review it in a peer-to-peer environment. So I can imagine, as an example, in week 2, when Sarah is here, if you have a project that you've been working on, the ask will be have it ready to demo in the breakouts. And in the breakout room, you'll be with 2 other people at least that are in your room. Each of you will present your project and give feedback to each other on how you feel about the work, et cetera, et cetera. If you wanted to get into that type of stuff in today's breakout, no one would stop you. It could be a good use of time. But for now, I'll pause for questions, say a word of thanks again to Adrian and Paul for kicking us off and for being here as track leaders. And then we can go to breakouts. So please feel free to unmute if you have questions.
So one of the kind of ways I saw games playing a big role in just developing the space was onboarding and self-organization. Sorry, it's really loud here. Let me get back to this question once things quiet down.
You're okay, Ravi. I
Oh,
think
it's fine.
that wasn't that bad. Yeah, and it's good to have some Colonel Fellow potentials in the background.
So one of the biggest kind of issues that I faced getting into this space was, when you step into a large community, and I started with Common Stack, there was the big issue about how you can contribute effectively. Onboarding for the most part is in the space is fairly nascent. But I think successful games manage to, create this onboarding experience that allows people to contribute to in very, very complex ways in a very intuitive fashion. And I think that's the one that the Web3 space, particularly decentralized organizations, will really, really benefit from if we can kind of create best practices for that. So I would love to kind of see how, how do you see this happening in a kind of non-visual medium that are DAOs right now?
Yeah, good question. And I guess I can contribute a little bit of that on kind of how I saw it happen on some of the other industries. Like I remember when mobile games were just coming out, most of them had terrible experiences. Like I don't know if you guys remember the initial apps in the iPhone. Like some of them were just simple, I would say, they're fart apps. Like it would just make a fart sound, and that's all you get. That's all these apps would do. And then eventually, like people kind of understood that it's good UX that would get more people on board. Like we can, the goal there was they wanted to bring more casual gamers rather than just gamers onto the space and grow mobile games. So I remember Zynga was one of the pioneers here when they said that the player or the user should have fun in the first 3 clicks. So that's something to kind of model your experiences around. Was they should be having fun quickly, because if someone's having fun, they'll continue engaging on your platform and try to go deeper. So that's something to take a look at games. Like, this has been studied very, very well, how to retain people. And there's just so many studies that I can share around how to build or restructure, like how you onboard people to a DAO. So it's a good, I think that's a good discussion point also that we can have during the 8 weeks, is how do we make these DAOs better to bring people in.
Yeah, I would love to take a look at your resources, because we tried to do something like this with with Common Stack and with Source Credit a little bit. Unfortunately, I am not from the gaming space. I don't have the language to enable that. We do work in UX a lot, so we kind of drew from some of those experiences. But it's always good to learn from successes.
For sure.
I think the one kind of disadvantage advantage this space has over gaming is most people who are engaged with DAOs don't expect instant gratification. I think that's just the standard right now. So we have a more patient crowd to deal with, and I think that's a good sandbox to kind of develop these best practices.
Yeah.
This also touches on a good point on general incentives for communities, and I guess especially in the context of DAOs. One input that I can bring is I've been working on developer experience for many years, and it's a similar idea to open source development, right? And I think Gitcoin is a great place to talk about open source development. We all experienced the governance token being released yesterday, and that's very exciting for a lot of folks. While Gitcoin didn't really require the level of incentivization to get developers to participate, to get a community together, co-creating, right? And I think one major takeaway that I got for doing developer experience, at least in DeFi, is a lot of these communities, a lot of these early DAOs, giving folks things to do, giving folks this sense of ownership, this sense of responsibility, the sense that they are helping create this value, right? Which makes them, I guess it gives that gratification that Paul is also talking about, right? It doesn't have to be financial, it doesn't have to be entirely tangible. As long as some people feel acknowledged, they feel part of something greater than themselves, I think that creates that sense of community that a lot of these DAOs need early on. So yeah, just some general ideas. To focus on intrinsic incentives for participation rather than to throw money at folks, for every action that they take or something like that, right? I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. Adrian is giving away the last module of kernel in a lot of ways, and there's no reason not to get into it. I mean, Paul probably referenced it briefly with the idea of finite and infinite games. This concept has made its waves around blockchain circles, the idea that finite games are played with a winner in mind, and infinite games are played with the intent of continuing the playing. And there's a lot of deeper ideas that come behind that, but Ethereum, if you look at like a finite infinite game, the first thing I'd point to is MetaDreamer put in Virgil Griffith's post on Ethereum is a game-changing technology, literally. One of the best posts on this from an economics perspective, if you haven't seen it and if you're interested in that particular type of writing. Paul wrote a post in the gaming track. It's the last module in the gaming syllabus on the website if you want to see it from more of a gaming point of view. But the point it gets at is that if you see what's happening in the Ethereum space, you have all these people who feel some sort of technological but social attachment to Ethereum. They build things on top of Ethereum that are games that then can be built on top of. And you see some of the second and third orders of this already in something like the Uniswap community, where you have the Ethereum community that started with unicorns and rainbows. Then you have Uniswap, which literally made the unicorn their logo, now has a Uniswap grants program that is funding projects that are well beyond the scope of the Ethereum Foundation grants program, and are starting to bleed into culture. They're funding esports teams. We know they're in talks with major music labels about things that they can do. And this isn't something that you look at Uniswap and say, well, hey, like that doesn't sound like it's exactly in context, but it's the scope of the game is expanding. The scope of the story that they're telling about what matters to their ecosystem expands. And when a startup or a community is born out of the Uniswap ecosystem, the story can continue. And this is a fabric that feels different. It's not necessarily perfect by any means, but it is what presently is happening and is perhaps worth reflecting on as a group and on your own projects. Cool. Some questions in the chat, maybe not for right now, but who is thinking about how to gamify Discord to drive more engagement, make it more interesting. Antonio is talking about dance and how we can use movement in digital spaces to drive community engagement. There seem to be, Tegan asked some questions about how to define creation in the circular loop slide that Paul shared at the end. Is a player a part of creation too? Is their data or their engagement, is that creating value? How do we think about that? I'm not sure, Paul or Adrian, if there's anything on those that you'd want to talk about now. It's possible that it's best to just explore those in the small groups for this first kickoff, and then go from there.
Maybe something really quick around player creating value as well. Like in games, there's, I guess the term is user-generated content. So there's a lot of other games that try to capitalize on that. I don't think people have found that the right model. I think Roblox has a good model wherein they allow developers to make games on their platform. Steam has a good model as well around community market. So there are these ecosystems we can take a look at to kind of see how players can build on, to see how players can really build value. And Twitch and Discord are actually very good models as well. There are bots in Discord that are able to make Discord a game itself. Like I haven't looked deeply into it, but just that interface of a chat with a chat bot and answering with that bot and with other players can be made into a game. So the sky's the limit, I would say. You just have to explore it.
Well, the interesting thing is one of the people doing that has a background in games, James Young at Abridged. And I think that's that's their entire philosophy, and they're doing some fantastic stuff. Removing certain UX friction, like opening up wallets and like onboarding people, organizing people around certain kind of like causes. It's that's the exact approach. It's a very not gamified, but kind of principles learned from games.
And one thing I wanted to share also was Slack. Slack used to be a game development company called Tiny Spec. They just pivoted from their game, used the technologies in that game to create Slack. So you can kind of see how games really bled into even just chat over enterprises. So yeah, it's really, if you look deep enough, you can find how game theory goes into what we're building.
I guess especially multiplayer games, right?
Especially multiplayer games, yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? The big games out there, obviously most of them, they are not integrated with crypto or anything like that. What I was thinking is, in case you have got a crypto NFT project that could could create, which basically create NFT that can be used in some of the bigger games out there. How difficult is it to make those games compatible with the project that somebody is developing, so the NFTs can be used by the avatar in the games? Is that a big deal? Is that something possible? Or you will require the big game company to completely change the platform, and there might be too much of a pain for them?
Yeah, I think it's really possible. It's I would say that the technology is actually there. Like if you don't, for example, if gas cost is your problem, you can use a layer 2. It shouldn't be a problem. It's more, I think, the incentives, as Adrian said, that these big companies are really incentivized to do everything on chain, and that makes sense as well, because if you don't design properly and there's an exploit in your ecosystem, then that destroys your economy. So it has to be very deliberate, it has to be very well designed. But there's nothing stopping them. You just need to find the right incentive structure. There are some games that have tried in Web3. MetaBoss by Neon District tried to create several of these games that playing together. That was very early on, though. I would say that it's also timing, like when people kind of realize what NFTs are, now that we are in this cultural moment where NFTs are coming out, then I think it would be a better environment to make this kind of interoperable universe, I would say, but there's nothing stopping them.
I guess one quick addition to that is that, yeah, from a technological point of view, it's relatively trivial to do such an integration, but the real issue are with the business models behind these companies, right? And I think that's what Paul is also touching on. And that kind of hints towards the whole idea of value extraction versus value creation, right? These companies are primed to, optimize for the extraction of value from its customers, from its users, while these new systems that we're trying to create kind of does the very opposite of that. So for these companies to adopt some of these new standards being developed becomes a bit of a existential crisis for them, I guess.
So basically you are saying, my thinking was mainly about these, maybe they're not really, but they are kind of gaming, this platform where you can join as an avatar, and basically using an NFT that could be, could be a dress, could be anything that can enhance the experience. They could perhaps integrate it, but then basically you're saying if that makes sense for them to make money, then it's fine. If it doesn't fit the business or how their platform generate revenues, that might not be the case. It depends mainly basically on them.
Yeah, I would say like for example, if you're making an avatar on a game like Fortnite, for example, then then if you're gonna open that up, then what are the implications of that? Then you have to kind of design what effect that will have on your economy, because honestly, Fortnite isn't really incentivized to do that. They have that mass number of users to be able to not do it, I would say. Like value, they're the ones really benefiting from that whole model that we currently have. So we kind of need to find a way to incentivize them, I would say.
So you need to know very well the game that you want to integrate with, and then find a reason to bridge and make sense to them first. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Stefania. I think we'll do 2 more and then make sure we have 30 minutes for breakouts. I see MetaDreamer from Metagame, and then maybe Matteo.
I just kind of wanted to riff on that last question a bit, because I've been seeing this a lot in terms of, people really trying to push for this like metaverse interoperability and how can we make things compatible with each other. And, it's totally right that it's not a technical issue. It's more so a coordination issue. How do we get people who are building their own standards in these different silos to work together to agree on these different things? And I think like one really cool thing that I haven't seen played out yet, but is an excellent way to sort of make the game theory of interoperability work, is for someone building a new Web3 game to allow like NFTs from an existing community to be used as like items or characters in their game. So, you know, I can create a game that, you know, you can bring in your axes to use as, you know, something, some sort of gameplay experience in my game. What that does is that, you know, the whole Axie community immediately now has like interest in my game because they have assets that are compatible with my game. So it's, in a way, it's like kind of like a vampire attack on another community, but it's actually positive sum, because that them being able to use those assets in my game increases the value of those assets as well. So, and at the same time, I open myself up to a whole existing community of users without, you know, needing to bootstrap my own you know, assets and try to like sell people on like the value of like my own game in an island, so, or in a silo. So I think we'll start to see stuff like that more, where the interoperability aspect will just come from people permissionlessly building stuff that allows, you know, Meebits or Axies or, you know, all these different NFT game assets that might be out there to be used as items in their game, because nothing's stopping them from doing that. So I think that's some positive, some game theory that might play out.
Yeah, a couple of people just tagged you in the chat. I think that this one is striking a chord. Let's let Simona reply real quick. I think she has something on this one.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the interoperability piece, I think we collectively need to unlearn this whole obsession with starting our own thing and making like our own little thing over here, regardless of whether you've already built this thing over here that I might be able to use. I remember when we were building Bounties Network and we were trying to get people to adopt the Bounty standard, everybody was like, yeah, great, but we have our own thing here. So it's all good that you built it, but we're just gonna start again and build it from scratch. But I think it is, you know, as the more we get used to that modularity and being able to pick pieces that have already been built and utilize them, and like you were saying, be able to kind of port them over across the different spaces, I think that is where we will see that. And it's happening a little bit, but we definitely need to unlearn this whole thing of like, oh, it's my startup, it's my thing, it's not your thing, it's mine. Right? We're moving from, you know, that competition to collaboration, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's one of the reasons why we're all here talking about it. And I hope that the more conversations we have about the importance of collaboration and picking the things that are already out there and are working, we're going to be able to structure it properly and really get to that interoperability piece.
Yeah, I really agree. And maybe to add one point there, I guess it's also a Web2 mindset that I myself am trying to get out of. Like, we're all building platforms instead of protocols. So we kind of, what is a protocol? Understand what it is and build towards that instead of building the same Web2 platforms that we're used to using.
And yeah, I think this also touches on, again, the idea of open source, of whatever you make, put it out there. One thing that I like to lean on is the idea of empathic development, which is exactly, your code should be public, the systems you design should be open, access to these systems should be permissionless. And this way we're building innovation. And essentially innovation is basically taking something made before you and tweaking it a little bit and doing something slightly different that makes it slightly better, and having that accessible for somebody else to extend it even further. And yeah, talking about modularity, talking about composability and how we're building these stacks all the way up. Yeah, that's a great point.
Mm. Yeah, and on that, Adrian, I think it's worth mentioning that it really kind of makes you rethink what value you have to bring and what unique insight you have to leverage if you are trying to do something that's a bit more entrepreneurial. And I was having a conversation a bit earlier today, I think it was with Chris. We were talking about using creating a ticketing service for music events, and we were talking about how that same technology, the same code, can be used by his community, which is in the underground techno and house community in Europe. Same thing could be used by a different ecosystem in the States that might be more hip hop focused. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned and shared where there's not really any competition between those two, and each can kind of bring their own communities and leverage that as the value.
one thing, so I'm looking at the chat. I just put a 50-50 poll out there. 13 people are down to continue Q&A, and 12 people have responded so far saying they'd be down to break out. I think what we'll do right now, because it's 50-50, is we'll open up the options for breakout rooms, but Mateo, Sparrow, and anyone else who wants to stay in the main room, just stay. Just don't go to your breakout room. And you have that option. You won't be forced into it. Sachin, what that means is maybe we'll just have to make sure that if people don't go to rooms, that we like combine rooms accordingly. Sachin, do you feel good about that?
Yeah. Like people have choice to join the room, and then I'll create lesser rooms just in case.
Yeah, so we'll create slightly less rooms just because we expect some people to just stay and jam and Q&A in a slightly smaller group. Thank you all for joining. If you have to leave at this point, we totally understand. The breakouts from this point onward, we're hoping are going to be more and more one-on-one. And that's the other thing, like John, myself, Simona, Sachin, Paul, Adrian, we're all thinking about, yes, these big, important like group conversations where we can share ideas, but also how we can get one-on-one time with you guys working on your own projects, your own ideas, and trying to like split that balance. So that's part of the reason why on the culture track, there's only 3 sessions in the 8 weeks. And on the gaming track, there's only 4 sessions. And the reason is during the off weeks, the hope is that we can spend more one-on-one time with you all. So just know that that's our intention. It's really hard to get the one-on-one time sometimes, but we want to do it. So don't hesitate to reach out at any point on your own project ideas, the things that you're working on. Okay, I think we'll break out. Even if you go to a breakout room, just keep up with the Slack and you can see kind of what's going on in the main room, I'm sure. And I think Sachin can kick us off now.
Yep. So you guys should be seeing the breakout room option, and if you'd like to join a particular room, you can.
I think Sparrow has a raised hand.
Yes, Sparrow, please.
Yeah. Hi, both of you. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. I wanted to pick back up on the thread about open source and contributing that incremental value, and really wanted to try and explore, how do you get return on that value? Say you contribute an idea to an existing project because you want to see it improve. There's currently, as far as I'm aware, no real mechanism for you to get value back from that contribution. And I wondered if that was something that maybe should be explored more fully, so that you did have this system that incentivizes collaboration, rather than people saying, well, this does kind of what I want, but not quite. I can do better, so I'm going to make my own.
Again.
Okay. I guess some thoughts that come to mind is open source is especially tricky because ultimately, what is the value there for a developer to contribute code to an open source repo or to fork the code to create something better? Maybe they have different ideas. Maybe the contribution that they see that they want to do doesn't seem fit given the current state of a project. Well, at least for me, if you fast forward like long enough, the real value is being created by the course of innovation, right? So Git is a really beautiful example of that, which is like you create something and then that gets forked and that evolves a little bit and then that gets forked further. And throughout this whole thread of forking and contribution, etc., like true innovation is happening, and this true innovation becomes valued, which is shared among like a whole community, right? I think that's especially relevant in the context of Gitcoin, right? Because it's trying to incentivize participants to contribute to open source without having this clear thing that I contribute code, therefore I get financially rewarded for this, right? I think also in the context of the centralized protocols, the idea that the code is public, and where does the value lies? Well, the value lies in the network, in the community that's created, that agrees to certain sets of principles and values, and agrees to continue to push that forwards, right? By contributing more code or by creating variations of it. And just to wrap up my train of thought there, last summer, like DeFi 2020 was a clear example of projects forking each other left and right, which at short sight might seem quite zero sum, where you're just competing for the same resources. But if we look at us today, right, like that actually helped us push forward as a whole ecosystem, right? We were able to create new systems, we were able to create new interactions between systems, because people were just like, well, I might not agree with their status quo, but I like the technology they created, and here I am forking it, deploying it with a few incremental changes, which just raises the tide for everybody to some extent, right? But yeah, that's just some of my own thoughts there.
But that seems to be almost opposite to what Simona was saying about, you know, we've developed this thing and we try and get people to use it, but everybody wants to create their own thing that does the same thing in a slightly different way. So I'm trying to resolve that tension between those two things, I guess. And maybe you can't be resolved. I don't know.
Yeah, my thinking around this is, I think it's also the challenge that we're trying to solve. And I think one of the fields we should take a look at are the DAOs. Like they're really trying to explore how we can really drive value. And I don't think there's a definite DAO that we can kind of take a look at to really, I guess, that really captures that whole value. I heard that MakerDAO is a good model, and perhaps Compound and Governance, or Compound, which Gitcoin is using as a reference. So, and also just to add to that, also I had a good conversation recently with Ronan from the Kernel Gaming Track as well, around us in the blockchain, all of us building that space. Just because we're in the crypto space, we all think of tokens, right? And sometimes maybe there's a gray space where tokens aren't needed. For example, when we're making games, sometimes people will just play chess because they want to become better, or they want to learn. So perhaps, I don't know, it's not an easy answer. I would say we still are looking for it. The DAO field is something we should take a look at, I would say, to try to find the answer to that. But it's probably attention, Sparrow, as you said, that it really have to find that balance.
It would be a great problem to solve, though.
Yeah, it is, right? Yeah, and I think SourceCred as well is a good reference. Like wherein they're trying to provide value to whatever you contribute to a network. So there's a lot of great minds thinking about it.
I agree about the source. Definitely agree about SourceCred. It's an amazing technology. It would be interesting to see it developed so that it itself could interoperate between communities.
Yeah.
I think we have Matteo. We can't hear you. No. Maybe we'll come back.
Can I ask a question?
I think we had Roberto maybe hit hand next. I don't know. After that, maybe if you want to raise hand, we can come to you. Roberto, go ahead.
Hey guys, what's up? Hi, nice to meet y'all. Thank you for the call and like bringing all these great ideas. It's really rewarding to see, like, through the presentation. I felt really like it reminded me a lot of all this internet thing going on in, I don't know, about 2008, 2010 or so, like the whole MMORPG thing, like blowing up. You had this different like ecosystems, like people trading their fake coins that didn't have any sense of value or anything like that, and like actually making a living out of that, and like now seeing that turn into something that's tangible, like it really like drives through my blood, like just seeing all this like finally turning into something that settled into really real lasting communities. And it's just like it really lights me up. So what I wanted to just say very briefly, like I like the approach of having this being as open source as possible, in the sense that it's easily maintainable by groups of people. Like I know that a lot of the games that we used to love, they either like change it in direction because, I don't know, the company decided that this new approach of selling, I don't know, skins would be like more profitable, you know, for the short term. Like they cashed a lot of bucks, and then, you know, the game disappeared, and the community that was behind it, you know, didn't support that decision. Like they moved away. But like a lot of the conversations I've been having with other people that played games so much before, it's like, what if those communities ended up like, you know, forking the code and like making their own, you know, development of that new game? And like now you see today, like World of Warcraft Classic, right? Like RuneScape Classic, and like people just go back to those things that they already knew and loved, and like continue building upon those things even more than the, you know, the new like reskin and like pre-pump versions, like where you pay to win and stuff like that. But you know, like there's so many different models, and what I just wanted to bring in came back to the question of like, how do we like align those incentives, right, and those rewards? And I like a lot the approach that, for example, Vivek was mentioning, like all these grant programs that, you know, support specific targeted, you know, like experiments. It's like, okay, we're gonna find us like a group that's playing, you know, in a very popular game, and to promote this ecosystem that we have. And in that sort of sense, like we're promoting through the creation of a token that we think that has some value, right? And if it has a utility to it, like that value is intrinsic to the ecosystem, right? Like we come up with all these like staking mechanisms, or like, you know, all these functionalities, and we already have that without like established platform jumping into other, you know, metaverses and like functioning for other stuff, like building on top of those. So what I wanted to bring in is just like, we have all these different protocols, and instead of, I think I kind of agree with what Simona was mentioning earlier. I'd like to hear like again, like rephrasing of what you meant there, but like I see a lot of opportunity into like uniting the existing protocols, in the sense that they are in a way a complete like universe that just keeps creating, you know, different iterations, because we're building still like on top of the ERC 721 sample, right? Like it's just making little iterations on top of that. So yeah, it's like we have the whole idea of like requests for proposals. We're looking for something that just kind of like this, and like we already can set out budgets for those sort of approaches. So yeah, it's just like I really think there's a big opportunity of, you know, starting to combine those together, and I wanted to bring a couple of ideas.
Yeah, I wanted to add a point also to what you mentioned, Roberto, around classics, right? Like World of Warcraft Classic, RuneScape Classic. One thing I can think of that people can take a look at is what Nathan Schneider is doing around exit to community. It's this concept of how, if a developer wants to exit the game, perhaps there's a way to give it to the community to control. So this isn't from games, actually, it's from his work that he's doing in meta governance and platform co-ops. So there's something we can take a look at on how we can, how we can continuously keep these games even if the developer or the creator has moved on to something else.
I guess one thing that I can also add here that just came to mind as you were speaking, Roberto, there was this incident a couple of years ago with this blockchain called Steemit, which basically was a tight community, and they experienced, I mean, I won't describe the whole story. It's a really cool rabbit hole to dive into, but essentially a centralized party took a huge majority of the power of the network, and the community decided to unite and fork each other and create the separate blockchain called Hive. And there was this whole conversation about, well, if this new blockchain manages to become more valuable than Steemit, that is a clear sign of community coming together for the principles that they believe in. And I think this also speaks to the idea of forking code, right? Because the code, by being public, he allows participants to be free to do something like that, right? I'm just going to drop a quick tweet that I just found on the chat from Vitalik back then, which is, it's a great, I think, angle to look at in the history of blockchains. But yeah, just a general thought that came across my mind there.
I'll just interject very quickly. I think a lot of this and a lot of what we're chatting about has so much to do with the redesign that we collectively have to go through in terms of not just how we define value, but how value flows. And even maybe further than that, how we relate to, and it kind of comes from how we define value, but how we relate to that monetary value, right? Because value in itself is a multifaceted concept. There's social value, there's human value, there's ecological value, there's cultural value. And we've been so kind of beaten into this obsession with just the cash value of something, that is all we see. How can I extract the most cash value out of something immediately or in as quick of a time frame as possible? And all of that is learned behavior, and a lot of it comes from economic theory, the fact that we've just been obsessed with economic growth for like donkey's years, even though it's not possible ad infinitum, and at some point it has to stop, but nobody ever considers that. The idea is that I feel we are at this point at that level of redesign and redefine. And once we have those things in place, we can then kind of go, oh, okay, this is how using something that somebody else has built isn't extracting value from me. It's actually enabling me to deliver more value. And then somebody else picks something that I've built and they deliver more value, rather than this very much, this is my bit, that is yours. This is how I make my money, that is how you make yours. But it's, again, as I always like to say, it's going to take a minute. We have to like uneducate ourselves from that whole way of thinking. And the same happens for everybody coming into this space, because you come with all of this knowledge, all of these metrics, all of these like, you know, KPIs, okay, whatever. You have to make 10x by I don't know what point, versus does this, what I am building, does this create real value? Also, if there is, the way I kind of see it in my mind's eye, there's this like pool of modules that you pick and choose based on what you want to build or what solution you're trying to build. And everything is accessible in terms of the instructions of how to use it. Anybody can hopefully tap in somehow to essentially create whatever it is that they need to create without the need of spending the time and the resources to build it from scratch. But again, it's exploring those and getting comfortable with that, with being collaborative versus competitive, is a thing. Because again, we've just been used to being competitors since we're kids. You have to be that kid in order to get in front. So, you know, welcome to the great unlearning is essentially the TLDR.
Yeah, definitely. Like I can speak to that also, coming from the games. As you see, we have, Simona said, all these metrics. We have something that we call the day 1, day 7, day 30, which is like, this is how many people should still be playing your game after these days. And we have a very specific metric that has to be 40%, 20%, 10%. Otherwise, your game is bad and it's going to get cut. So yeah, so that's the model that all these games are being designed on, and it's the reason that you see all of these games look the same, because that's the metric. So if we unlearn that and kind of make new games around cooperation, what would that look like, right? And about open source, what would that look like? So I think it's great to have this community for us to explore that.
I think this lays the foundation as well for the biggest value that you can probably take from the kernel experience, right? Rather than learning a lot of the more like practical or technical knowledge that is widely available out there, but coming back to like the conceptual level and these principles, which is so important going forward, since this, yeah, like Simona said, is a whole redefinition, like a big reset that we're pressing here going forwards, building the future, I guess.
Yeah. And maybe to add a little bit to that, as a bit of a preview also to what Andy writes, it also helps to I guess it's Andy's way of thinking to go the middle way, I would say. Like there is this parable about the ox and the fence, right? Where there's, or the fence and the nobleman who was walking through his fields, and he was so angry at the fence. Like he was asking, why should that be there? I'd rather just go over it. And then he got run over by a bull. So we also have these systems in place that make sense. So kind of balance that out with what we're kind of trying to disrupt.
Awesome, guys. I really think that's very interesting, and I'll try to share with my friends too. It's like, and I agree, like in my experiences with DAO, it's the same. We learn in college to do this and that with specific ways of approaching like managerial things. And then when you try to apply it with the DAO, it just does not work, and you have to like turn it all down and start all over. So thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. Let's continue talking.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess we can go through the people that have raised hands, right? Like Kyle, I think. Do you have something to discuss?
Yeah, Adrian mentioned when you're talking about first principles, he also mentioned second level thinking. And I was just wondering if he could elaborate on that. Not what that is exactly.
Sure. I probably won't do justice to the whole concept, but within the context of the conversation that we're having, also relating to value creation versus value extraction. First and second level thinking here would relate to the idea of, there's many fellows today studying Block 3, coming with some project idea that you might already have, or seeking to build something new in the space. We all come from a Web2 context. Some of us are indie hackers, so we might have the idea, well, yeah, and also talking about metrics and KPIs, right? Like, well, I know I'm an entrepreneur, I can build a business, I can earn a profit from this business, right? And I think especially in the context of crypto and Web3, and especially with NFTs, what you're creating will outlast this first thought, right? This first thought being, hey, I get to release something out there and I get to make a profit from it. It's a bull market, it's very exciting, etc., right? So what happens after that, right? What is the decay of this product that I'm releasing, or what is the relationship that I will have with these users, with these customers, which are coming to pay value for what I'm creating, right? Yeah, so the idea of you're not just releasing a product, you're creating a network, you're creating a community, you're interacting with other participants. How are you going to leave them afterwards, right? Are you just going to take the value that you captured and you're going to walk away? Or are you going to continue to create value? Or are you thinking more about creating value for others, which will also gain value for yourself, but in a way more sustainable and long-term way, right? I guess that those are just some thoughts within the context of culture, the context of NFTs and artists, which are highly applicable, I think, for this group. But in general, like you can look at it as an investment thesis, right? Like we all may be speculating on some of the assets in the crypto space, and you might think like, well, this coin is going up, so I guess it's very logical that I just put some money into this coin. But I guess the second order thinking there goes that, well, there's something behind that that is driving this, so let me pursue that, or let me try to be, I had a little bit of the general thought. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm reminded, Adrian, of I think Kevin Owalki was talking about the race to the base of the brain, like most of the degens have, right? Like it's really about number go up, but we can kind of try to think a little bit deeper on I guess our human impulses and try to think another level higher.
Yeah, I guess looking past the immediate results, considering the impact long term in many ways, I guess is a clear definition of it.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Kyle. So I guess we can go through the next ones. And Justin, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, hey guys. I was going to add to this kind of the idea around both like the nature of the game and open source, but also I think value and I was kind of typing in Slack, but I was writing kind of about how, so our organization is like a decentralized human organization, so DHO versus DAO. My first thought was around how we were able to thought about our own values, the kind of the developmental challenge of valuing yourself enough to be able to hold a certain boundary around what you find valuable, while also while still being open source. So all the work that we do is public and open. Anyone can go on and not only see like our information on our blockchain, but also I think they can go on and see all of our financial information in spreadsheets on Google, or they can go read a book that has all the links to all the things we've created so far. And so we've open sourced as much as possible, and all of our conversations happen on Discord. So it's also very open. Everything's kind of visible. At least it's transparent. And then what you want to do with it is what you do with it. But the way we were able to capture value came from, and we're kind of in a process right now around it, but like how much can we, where do we find our value to kind of be sourced from? And how can we put a boundary around that is semi-permeable, and also maybe sets the tone for how our principles and our kind of capital V values say we relate to others and how they can relate to us. And so one of the biggest challenges we found was just establishing right boundaries. And right now we don't really have those boundaries in every place that we need them. So which is totally cool, because our main principle is that what we create is for the system. It's meant to be a resource, and so we're letting that kind of flow. But we do recognize the challenge in letting that our value, the amount of value we're putting in, flow out, and not having a right relationship that truly is regenerative. And we're kind of a core aspect of what we are in this kind of seeds ecosystem where Samara is existing, which is our DHO. We're a regenerative ecosystem or regenerative economy, and so there's a need to have that really kind of true reciprocity. And even more than that, maybe like a prosperity where the give and take is just so seamless that all things thrive together. And that may seem kind of idealistic, because it is idealistic, and also it's the thing that we're trying to compare or look at all of our thoughts and our actions and our work through that lens. And so maybe what I'm trying to say, or what I'm pointing to, is I put a guide in Slack, but it's a game guide. So the game guide looks at the idea that, like, what is a game? So it's actually like, the game you play in a very like microcosmic way, but also there's like the game that is life. And so we think about how do we get people to come into the field or into our game and know how to play based on what they're willing to see and learn and invest. And that investment does kind of cover those different capital types. I'm not really advocating for this thing. I'm kind of pointing at something which I think is like to open source your guide to understand how to navigate real life, or to navigate life by breaking it down and giving the governance structures and the monetary economic structures, our tokenomics, and kind of giving it all out and saying, hey, like, we want you to be successful here, and we know the only way you can get there is by having information. And so we there's no block to that. There's probably blocks, there's probably language barriers, right? Because it's not really translated yet. So we're looking at those things, but there's the opportunity to have access is here. And we want you to know, we want you to learn, because what we're really focused on is civilization. And so I think the scope of the game that you're playing allows you to kind of create games for others that feed into the larger vision, but don't necessarily kind of create that competition vibe, even if it's competitive in nature, right? It's kind of fun to play a game competitively, but we're not in the thing that the civilization is in competition with is probably the old paradigm, but also other entities that want something different than regenerative, a regenerative kind of renaissance. And so I'm saying that thing because I'm saying these things because it's like saying a lot of things. Yeah, I know that, right? But what I want to say at the center of this is like, I think recognizing the game that you're in helps to kind of maybe, and also what the principles or the values that each individual upholds, and what boundaries allow for those principles and values to be enacted, have been things that we've been practicing or learning about in order to be able to create systems or create value streams that are regenerative, that do match living systems, and they're dynamic and they're alive, and they allow for something like prosperity or abundance to be actualized. And yet the lessons that I'm noticing that are so important are the developmental lessons to be able to recognize what we're in when we're in it, and being able to make conscious decisions about how we want to navigate that. And so this is that's the quality of the nature of the game that I find myself playing in this moment, as we're decentralizing as a human organization. Yeah, thank you.
That's super interesting. And I think it's that shift, right, from it's a shift to a dynamic of thriving, like you were saying, from that dynamic of mindless growth, and being agnostic about growth, but focused on human thriving, right? And like you say, from extractive to regenerative. You want that butterfly effect that essentially goes in, like the butterfly wing that comes in and back in and back in, versus just up and down or left to right, where you take something and take it out and that's it. There's nothing that goes back in, right? Which is very much like at a broader global level, that's what we've been doing for ages. And I think coming back and being conscious to come back to a thriving dynamic is something that we need to consider just in life, let alone in the build, let's say, right? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Justin.
If I was going to add anything similar, just edit one aspect, was that I think we talked about the growth of human over, kind of being the main priority. And I say we're actually looking at agriculture. So we're trying to say, how do we actually live and regenerate alongside the earth, and make sure that we have a biospheric consciousness, or a biospheric awareness, at least, in the choices that we make, because I think that is also really important, that, the kind of human-centric development, or I know you weren't saying this necessarily, but I just wanted to say this part because I think I just wanted to really highlight that I think that thinking about how we relate to all living things and the planet as a whole, as a living being or body that we are part of, is also a really critical aspect to that, the gameness of this thing, or the regenerative nature of the time that we're in.
And I'll post this in Slack as well. Look at the work of Robert Ulanovich and Janine Benyus. They were chatting about the butterfly economy, where it becomes regenerative by design. And there's a lot of writing around that and ideas around that, which very much focus on that. It's not just about us, it's about everything that is connected and we're all part of, and so on. So I'll post a couple of links in the Slack as well.
Yes. I think just to be respectful of time, I'm gonna drop. We're already 3 minutes over. Thank you all for joining for kickoff. We'll follow up next steps on the culture track. The next session is next week with Sarah Zucker. And then I think the Gaming Guild continues 2 weeks from now. In the off weeks, the one-on-ones and the ways that we can kind of continue the convo we're working on, but we're hopeful that we'll have space for engaging on your projects and making sure we get people who are looking for projects in touch with people who have established projects and are looking for guidance or co-conspirators. But thank you for being here. Thanks to Adrian and Paul for kicking us off.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey guys. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.